Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is part 2 of the series 30 most important system design concepts. So in the previous part we have discussed on topics like client server architecture, IP address, what DNS is, what are proxy, reverse proxy and what is latency. In this video we will be looking into next 5 important topics that are HTTP and HTTPS. Second will be API. Third will be REST, fourth will be about GraphQL, and fifth will be database. So let's begin. Once the connection is made, so whenever client, in the previous video where we saw that client is sending request to the server, so and server is responding back with the response. So once the connection is made, how do client and server actually communicate? Okay, what is the mode? How do they communicate the data? They communicate using HTTP or HTTPS. So whenever you are visiting any website, your browser, that is your client, and server, they communicate using set of rules that are HTTP, that is called as HTTP. So the client sends the request, it is going to send the request to the server via network, that is internet, and this request includes the headers containing details like request type, it can have browser type and cookies, and sometimes in request we also send payload, that is request body, which basically carries additional data like some input form or anything that can be something extra details. So server, once it receives the request, it is going to process the request and respond with a HTTP response. Either it is going to return us with the successful data, with the requested data whatever was asked by client, or it is going to give us the error message if something goes wrong. So if there was some problem at server end or backend side, then it is going to give us some kind of error. HTTP has some kind of security threat, like there is some kind of security flaw. What this means is, in HTTP, what happens, so the data whatever server is sending, right, that is sent in plain text format. So if there is any hacker who is intercepting the response whatever you are getting, they can basically see whatever is the data. If you have logged in into banking application and you are requesting some data about your amount, how much you have, or some IFSC code or anything, any kind of data you are trying to see, and if you are making use of HTTP, then hacker can see the data, because HTTP, in HTTP the data which is sent is, it is sent in plain text format. That is why if you observe in nowadays, in modern websites, they make use of HTTPS. So HTTPS encrypts all the data using SSL or TSL protocol. So this is HTTP, you can see it is an insecure connection, but whereas HTTPS, they are going to encrypt all the data from the server whatever you are getting into SSL or TLS protocol, ensuring that even if someone is intercepting the request, they can't read it or they can't alter it. So there is some kind of certificate signed at server end using SSL certificate, like there are SSL certificates. So using these protocols, the whatever data you are getting from the response, they are encrypted, and if any hacker is also seeing, they will not be able to read the data. So that is why HTTPS is more secure version of HTTP, and that is what is used in all the modern websites nowadays. Now let's see, once client and server, either HTTP or HTTPS, once they have made a connection, they do not exchange the raw data, like whatever is the data, they are not going to exchange it on HTTP. HTTP is just set of rule, it is just mode via what request and response can be achieved. But how does that communication actually happen? What will be the structure of request, what will be the structure of response, how do we decide that? This is just set of rules of our internet, how the request is sent and response is received. Now let us see our next topic, that is API, which means application programming interface. So HTTP, it was just a protocol for transferring the data, but it doesn't define how the request should be structured and what will be the format of our response. So this is where we have API. What is API? API is application programming interface. Think of API. API is like, here you can see API, it is like a middleman that allows client to communicate with server. It is a middleman which on the internet, which will allow application to communicate with the server without worrying about low level details. So a client sends a request to the API, whatever is our application or browser, it is going to send the request to the API, and API which is hosted on server, it is going to it is already there, like it is deployed on the server. It is going to process the request, interact with the DB, and it might interact with DB, or it might also connect with some other backend services also to get the data or prepare the data. It is going to perform the action, it is going to prepare the response, and it is going to give it back to the browser, or it is going to give it back to the client. And the response whatever you are getting, that will also be in some kind of structured format, and that can be in JSON or it can be in XML. So whenever a response is received, in response header there is one property called the type of the response, where it is written that whether it is JSON or it is XML. So that is how client can understand that what is the format in which response is being sent to the client, and that is how accordingly it is going to handle. And in APIs also, we have different types of API styles to serve the different needs, and there are most popular ones. First one is REST API and second one is GraphQL. Let's see what they are. Among different APIs, REST is most commonly used and it is the simplest of the APIs. So REST APIs, this follows the set of rules that define how client and server will communicate over HTTP in a structured way. So REST is stateless. One important feature of REST is it is stateless. That means requests are independent. They need server need not store the details of client. So every request which is coming, it is independent, and everything is created as resource. So for every module, there might be different REST APIs, like for users, product, details, delivery, like this, etc. So there will be many REST APIs, and it uses HTTP methods. HTTP methods like get is used for retrieving, post is used for creating, put is used for updating, and delete is of course used for deleting the data. So REST API are great because they're simple and scalable, but there are limitations. So limitations are when you are dealing with complex data retrieval, REST endpoint often return data more than what is needed, or they lead to inefficient network use. Either they are giving you more data or they are giving you less data, and to get the extra data which you want, because the first API gave you less, you'll have to hit another API, which will lead to inefficient network use. That is why we have GraphQL. So in GraphQL, this was introduced in 2015 by Facebook. And unlike REST, GraphQL lets client ask for exactly what is needed. So nothing more is given, nothing less is given. Exactly whatever is asked is given to the client. With REST API, if you need users profile along with their recent post, that is what you will write in the query, and there will be no multiple API calls. Everything will go in one query only. With GraphQL, you can combine all of these requests into one single query, and then server is going to respond with the requested data. However, GraphQL also comes with some kind of disadvantage. So disadvantage is it requires more processing on the server side. It isn't easy and simple like REST API. So now this is about the GraphQL. Once the client has made the request, where do we store the data? Whenever you are trying to access or update or any kind of action you're trying to perform, where is that data stored? So that data is stored in DB. Okay, our application DB is actually a backbone of any application. So if our application is dealing with some small data, we can store it in variable or some memory. But if there is massive large amount of data, then it has to be stored somewhere in DB. So a DB is a backbone of any application, and it ensures that data is stored, retrieved, and managed efficiently while keeping it secure and consistent. When client requests to store the data or retrieve the data, the server communicates with the DB. So client is sending the request, and then server is going to ask from the DB, and it is going to fetch you the detail, and it is going to give you the data whatever client requested. So these are 5 important topics we have discussed in this video. If you found this video to be helpful and informative, do consider giving a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any suggestion, let me know in comment section. Thanks for watching.